I think maybe one of the principles that we can tack on here is that when we think about diet and approaching food, are we coming at it from a place of loving ourselves and wanting to nourish ourselves with healthful food? Or are we coming from a place of self-loathing and we want to punish ourselves?
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. I've got this bad habit when I run up against something novel, something I don't understand and don't know how to begin making sense of, and especially if for some reason it raises a feeling of discomfort or irritation, I'll dismiss it with an eye roll and call it stupid. That's stupid usually equals, I don't understand that, and I'm not sure that I want to. I do it more frequently than I like to admit, and have noticed often enough, whatever I'm aiming the "that's stupid" at, it's like an X on a treasure map. It means dig in. There's something here. That's stupid feels like tripping over something that needs my attention. It means a habituated pattern or belief is about to get challenged. Demolition might be called for, and for sure, it means class is in session and homework is involved. I like to think of myself as open-minded, innovative on a good day, and with a healthy appetite for novelty. But when that stupid floats through my mind, I know that some kind of resistance is bubbling up from the watery depths. There are plenty of thoughts that carry the subtext of, ooh, that's cool, interesting, or have a feeling of attraction toward the object of thought. It's helpful, sure enough, but that's stupid. It shows me more clearly the texture of my biases, beliefs, and hopes for how the world could be, which, often enough, are wrong. That little phrase, it lets me off a hook that I probably should be on. Oddly enough, when I have a strong negative visceral reaction, it rarely ends up meaning no. More often it means pay attention and go a little bit slow. And it might be that no is indeed the right answer. But a reactive no is not as helpful as a considered no. And then there are the times, and there's plenty of them, that my habituated success of dealing with a particular situation, it needs a thump upside the head because the world is ever changing. But it's hard to notice those changes when you're not paying attention. That's stupid. It really means pause and pay attention. It's a strange way I have of getting my attention, but it seems mostly reliable. I've got a lot of respect for people who help others with nutrition and eating habits. This, for me, is one of the tougher aspects of practice, in large part because of the emotions and beliefs that people carry about themselves, how they eat, what they think they should eat or not. Mostly, I listen to how hard people are on themselves about their, air quotes here, diet. Either they're on it with an OCD level of compulsion or off the mark with terrible feelings of guilt and failure. It's as if there is a standard of perfection, and if you're off, even a little, well, then you're a complete failure. The kind of dietary purity that many aspire to is more often than not a source of suffering and self-recrimination. This is why I wanted to invite Brenda Lee to a conversation. She's both a nutritionist and an acupuncturist, and I wanted to know if diet, like so many other aspects of life, was subject to the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule basically describes the asymmetrical relationship of input and output. For example, 20% of your patients bring you 80% of your income. The top 20% of a sales force, they bring in 80% of the sales. In school, 20% of the students, yep, you got it, they ask 80% of the questions. This got me wondering if it's possible in the world of nutrition to help our patients by having them attend to the 20% of good eating habits that would bring them 80% of the effect that they're seeking. Likewise, what's the 20% of things that people should not do to get that 80% good return on health? We'll get into this with Brenda in a moment. Stay with us. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out the new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lau, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AccuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit AccuFastNeedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Brenda Lee, welcome back to Qiological.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I'm excited to do this.
I am too. I think it's a fantastic topic today. And you being, I was going to say an expert, but God, I hate that word. You being experienced with nutrition, I think is a good person to have on for this, because I think everyone listening to this podcast right now probably thinks food is important. probably talks to their patients about it, probably feels frustrated, overwhelmed, all kinds of other emotions around dealing with nutrition in our clinical work.
Yeah. Well, food and nutrition are, it is the cornerstone of our health, but it can be such a confusing area because there's so much information floating around nowadays, and it's hard to know, who to believe anymore and what to eat.
So the thing about food, again, over the years, there's diet fads, there's this, there's that. This is good for you. This is not good for you. The food pyramid gets inverted. Things that were supposedly healthy, now they're not. Like back in the 50s, they considered cigarettes healthy. We know about that these days. There was a time when eating fat, that's going to kill you. And now, if you don't eat enough of the right fat, it's going to kill you. There's all kinds of stuff, not to mention the emotional factors that go into food, and good luck unwinding those because it's like so part and parcel with our nutrition, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. You're touching on a lot of juicy topics here, Michael. But the emotion part, it's so intertwined with food because food can be a big source of comfort for people as well, and a big source of pleasure. And it's also something that brings people together in social situations. So it gets really complicated when people, they try to change what they eat or they try to go on a certain diet, and all of a sudden that might affect whether or not they can spend time with their friends. It might affect their social relationships. And also when people, if they're dealing with some kind of emotional difficulties, they might turn to food as a way to comfort themselves. And that can also add on challenge.
Well, heck yeah, food never says no. The container of ice cream never says no. The container of ice cream says, mmm.
I love it back too. I can relate.
I am struck with the word that you just used, intertwined, that our food and our emotions are intertwined. It's not enough to say they're connected, intertwined. And good luck untangling that,
Yeah, I actually don't know if you can untangle that. I think that's just part of the package.
I don't think so. I think it is part of the package. And so that's why I invited you to this conversation today, because I've got an idea and I want to see if it holds water. Okay. We haven't really talked about this other than to say, I've got an idea, let's talk. And you said, sure, let's talk. So here it is. I have discovered through a number of different, let's say, explorations in life, not to mention living through life, that there's this thing called the 80-20 principle, also known as the Pareto principle. Are you familiar with it, the 80-20 principle?
Yes, I'm somewhat familiar with it.
Okay, so what's your sense of the 80-20 principle?
Okay, so it's when you find the 20% of kind of energy or effort that you put into something to get 80% results.
Right. So the thing about this is that's so interesting. It shows up in all kinds of places. So for example, if anyone looks at their clinical practice, they will probably notice that 80% of their income comes from 20% of their patients, right? And when you think about the arguments you have with your spouse, 80% of your arguments come from 20% of the disagreements that you have. You could have all kinds of disagreements, but there's 20% that are going to generate the lion's share of the conflict and the arguments. And this principle seems to show up everywhere. I love the 80-20 principle because, well, I like to think of myself as lazy. Some people say I'm efficient. Maybe they're not that different. I figure if I can put in the right 20% of effort and get 80% of the bang for that buck, on most days that's good enough. Especially when you consider that to get that last 20%, you have to put in 80% of the effort. Why would you do that? So given that the 80-20 principle seems to be kind of built into how the world works, and also given that when it comes to nutrition and diet, we've got these crazy ideas that if you're not 100% on it, then you're a total failure. I've had people that are very strict with their diets, but they miss it by 5% or something. And it's like, oh, I'm such a failure, right? What if we could turn down the noise on nutrition or help our patients turn down the noise by helping them understand what is the most important 20% to pay attention to get 80% of what they want? Because my suspicion is most folks would be like, I do this to get this much and I don't have to be perfect. Oh my God. Brenda Lee, what a relief that would be to our patients, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we definitely don't have to be perfect when it comes to nutrition. And that in itself can be a burden when we're, assigning morality to our diets and telling ourselves whether we're a good person based on how we eat.
Right. So can I be like, what's the right 20% of morality that'll get me to 80% of being a virtuous person?
That's a great question. And I think we should really discuss this because I think it's really important considering how much noise there is out there that really can we distill it down to 20%? And I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Are you ready?
I'm handing you a megaphone. Have at it.
Okay. So I think the 20% comes down to two things. The first thing,
Only two things?
only two things, 10% each. So the first thing is it really comes down to just focusing on principles. The first thing is focus on principles. The second thing is listen to your body.
Okay. I'm taking notes here. Okay, so focus on principles. What are the principles to focus on?
So in Chinese medicine, we love principles. I think we kind of glamorize Li a little bit sometimes, right? But I think being a Chinese medicine practitioner has really made me a better dietitian. And I think it's because in Chinese medicine, we focus a lot on principles. And that helps us to sort through a lot of the noise and the confusion that comes in the clinic, right? Because sometimes we have patients and they have like 50 different symptoms and it gets really confusing really quickly. So that's why we need to have some kind of framework to be able to kind of focus on, the basic, go back to basics. So the principles that I think are most important in nutrition, there's a few of them. I would say the first one is to eat as close to nature as possible. And this one, honestly, it's kind of just common sense, right? If you eat a single ingredient whole food, such as broccoli or a hunk of meat or an apple, it's probably going to be healthier than some kind of snack bar with 37 ingredients in it. So there's that piece.
Fewer ingredients is better.
Yes, I would agree. One could argue that maybe if you read the ingredient label and there was a ton of ingredients and all the ingredients were natural. But at the end of the day, when something is commercially prepared, the priority there is profit. The only time where your health is in priority is when you're in charge of your own food.
There's that. We live in a busy world. I can see outsourcing our nutrition to some degree. I mean, a lot of us do. It's convenient. And we're just talking about looking at the labels. Maybe there's a label and there's a bunch of good stuff in it. I'm thinking the air quotes here, the superfoods, very, very popular these days. And there's a bunch of stuff and you look at the ingredients and it's all, it gets checkmarked in the good category. Brenda Lee, how good is that stuff?
Okay, there's a few things to unpack here. So the first thing is there can be loopholes as well to what needs to be on a label or not. So sometimes if it's just a really small amount, it doesn't even need to be labeled. Or sometimes like things might be labeled as like natural flavor, and that can be really vague.
Right. What the hell is that? I've seen that. Natural flavor.
Pretty much be anything, really. So it's concerning. And generally, I would just say that it's just safer to stick to a food that you see it and you know what it is, as opposed to something with lots of things on the label. And something else with regards to the superfoods, this is a whole nother can of worms. I don't know if we want to go into that right now.
let's dip our toe into it, just so we know what's in the mix here.
Okay, sounds good.
And the reason I say that is because then we can decide where in that 2080 it belongs.
I'm someone who doesn't believe in superfoods because people kind of say like, okay, based on like how many nutrients or antioxidants are in a food, then this one is like super, super good for you. But I don't think that's true because it really depends on who is the person we're talking about and what are their circumstances. Because sometimes a potato could be a superfood. Potatoes are really starchy, and sometimes if people are having something like loose stools and diarrhea, that kind of has the properties of like white rice and some of those chalky herbs that we use for diarrhea. And a peeled white potato can be phenomenal for stopping diarrhea. So that could be a superfood. So I don't believe in that whole concept. And another issue with superfoods is that they tend to be taken from different cultures and then kind of fetishized a little bit. So they're just stripped from their cultural context, like goji berries, for example, and talked about like, oh, look at all these antioxidants, and without any acknowledgement of how goji berries are actually used in Chinese medicine.
Right. So what you're bringing up here, we have to pay attention to a person's constitution. That's one leg. The other leg is their current situation, what's up with them. It's great to hear, potatoes get such a bad rap these days. Ooh, they're a nightshade. Ooh, it'll make you fat, blah, blah, blah. Starchy. Same thing with bread, same thing with crackers. I recently had a little gastrointestinal episode, and I want to tell you something. Some bread, some white bread was like, oh, it felt so good. I could digest it. It settled my stomach. It was just phenomenally yummy. It was unbelievably delicious in that moment.
So white bread was a superfood for you in that moment.
And had a little butter on it too. It was so good. Oh, but it's true. We learn this in Chinese medicine. We learn to look at context. But it's so difficult at times. We're part of the larger culture, and there's these ideas about what's healthy, what's not. And to come back to our basics and remember them. Here's the other thing too. We're very keen on looking at how herbs are combined. You were just mentioning certain superfoods. They have different herb substances, berries, whatever, from different cultures. So number one, stripped of the cultural context. But now you're also combining things that have never, ever been combined together in the history of the world. How do we know that's good for someone?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess you'd have to just observe over a long period of time to see if they're safe.
Or maybe a short period of time. How many times have you had people come in and tell you about the healthy smoothie they have, and then they get diarrhea afterwards? See, I'm being cleansed.
Yeah, who knows? Was it the handful of ice they threw into the smoothie that gave them the diarrhea?
Exactly. So, okay. So superfoods. Again, I like your rubric here, thinking of 80-20, eat simply. Eating simply would fall in that 20%.
Yes, you nailed it. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I like to keep things as simple as possible because I get a lot of people asking me a lot of really specific questions, and I think it's not a really good use of energy to be focusing on things like, should I be supplementing with this vitamin? Is saturated fat good or bad? How many grams of protein should I be eating? And I mean, it depends on the person, but generally, it's not a good use of time to focus on that. It's far more useful to just stick to the principles, eat close to nature, eat simply, prepare as much as your own food as possible.
Okay, so principle number 2, prepare as much as you can.
Exactly.
Make it DIY, do it yourself.
Yes. And this could sound like it's more than 20%, especially for someone who is not preparing much of their own food. That might sound like a really daunting task. But honestly, it's not as scary as it seems. So I think the key thing here, I don't know if this deserves its own principle status, but is to plan ahead, because that is going to go a long way to help you eating your home prepared foods. All it takes is just taking half an hour on the weekend. Just sit down, put on some nice music, and start jotting down like what meals you want to eat for the week. Maybe go on Pinterest for some inspiration, and then make a little grocery list. And then once you have a plan in place, it's so much easier, because that's often the hardest thing to do, is knowing what to cook and what to eat. So it just takes a little bit of time each week.
Well, again, we're not saying that there's no effort. We're saying there's 20% of particular effort. So it sounds like planning for sure falls within that 20%.
Oh, yes, that's huge.
Okay.
Let's see. So far we have, eating close to nature, eating simply, cooking your own food, planning ahead. I want to keep it simple, so I don't want to have too many principles. I think that really covers it. Maybe the one thing I would add is to eat mindfully and chew your food well.
Chew your damn food. I once heard somebody say to me, I can't remember who it is. This was many years ago, but they said, your stomach doesn't have teeth.
Unfortunately, it does not.
Or fortunately, those teeth will get worn down quick in that acidic environment. That's for sure. Okay. Wow. This is really interesting, Brenda, because I know for myself and I know for my patients for sure, and you were just mentioning this, they want to know like how much protein or how much this, how much that, carbohydrate, what kind of carbohydrate. And it seems to me like what you've done is sidestep that question and really invited people into looking at simplicity and thoughtfulness.
Yeah, exactly.
Simplicity and thoughtfulness. It'd be so much easier if you could just tell me the 20% of what I should eat and what I shouldn't.
Well, that's what people want. They just want, oftentimes, like, just give me a list of rules, no this, yes, this.
Okay, so it's not simple.
Well, that's the thing. Perhaps it's simple, but not easy.
Simple but not easy. You sound like a Zen practitioner.
I listen to too much Geological.
That phrase has been known to come out of my mouth from time to time. All right. The other thing that you had mentioned, and I think this is where a lot of us run into some rough water, is listening to our body. I'm thinking of a patient I have, and I just love her to pieces. I love most of my patients to pieces. Have you noticed that you kind of love the people that come to see you on a regular basis? They're so, they're just open and inquiring and, on some kind of a journey. It's hard not to kind of fall in love with them, be happy to accompany them.
They kind of become like a family member that you're excited to catch up with after a while.
Totally. So I've got this one woman, and she loves Diet Coke. She loves it. And she says, and she also knows that it really mucks up her digestion. But she says this, she says, it's the only thing that gives me comfort. Oh my God, right? Talk about entanglements. So how do you listen? Help me out with helping her out by how do you listen to your body when it seems like your body might be lying to you?
Oh, man.
Nice softball question.
Yeah, we're jumping into the deep end with this one. Michael, you're such a skilled interviewer and listener that I suspect you might have had conversations with her about, maybe where that need for comfort may be coming from. But I think it would be worthwhile to explore that with the person to see, what might be going on for them, that they need to feel like they need to rely on a food for comfort. Because I remember a patient, and he was having trouble incorporating more vegetables into his diet. And I remember I spent a few sessions just giving him all these wonderful ideas about different fun and easy ways he could incorporate vegetables into his diet.
That didn't work so well, did it?
And then I think one day he wasn't making any changes. And one day I was like, okay, what's going on? Like, let's just sit down and talk about it. And that's when I realized that he actually hated his job, and it was really, really stressful. And he was in the process of trying to get to find another job, and he was already applying. And so that made me realize that, oh, okay. So because of all that stress and all that emotional challenges he was having in his work, the last thing he wanted to do was eat a vegetable. He didn't have the time to do that or the energy to do that. And also he just wanted comfort food. So
Yeah. Like one more damn thing I have to do goes up in the work troublesome column. I really want that donut.
yeah.
The cake donut, not the kind with the glaze, just the cake, you know. Yeah, so sometimes people are overwhelmed and, and then it doesn't make it any easier that in the back of your mind, you're going, well, this is good for me and I should be doing it, but I'm not, which makes me an even worse person than I thought I was. And
Yeah, exactly. And then sometimes that can cause this vicious cycle where people then feel ashamed about what they eat. And then that.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for naming that. I hadn't thought about the shame aspect of it until you just mentioned it. But now that I think about it, it's so incredibly there for so many people. They're actually talking about shame.
It's huge.
Okay. So maybe part of our 20% is helping people resolve, get through, untangle. I mean, how do you work with shame?
I think maybe one of the principles that we can tack on here is that when we think about diet and approaching food, are we coming at it from a place of loving ourselves and wanting to nourish ourselves with healthful food? Or are we coming from a place of self-loathing and we want to punish ourselves? Because I think a lot of people, especially in the weight loss kind of world, a lot of people they really don't like the way that they look, and they feel like they have to go on something really punishing in order to fit in with societal ideals. But I really encourage people to eat in a way where I'm taking care of myself. I love my body. I appreciate my body for what it does, and I want to nourish it with the best foods possible.
Oh boy. You don't have to go very far in looking in any direction where there's some kind of advertisement targeted at you that's reminding you how your physical being is deficient.
Oh, yeah. And I think a lot of those ideals actually are not healthy to strive for. Yeah, that's the thing, is that there's a lot of unhealthy ways that people can use to lose weight. And even if they end up looking like that person on the billboard, maybe their health is actually in a worse state than they were before.
Right. Because they could look like that person on the billboard, but my suspicion of what people are looking for, I mean, maybe to some degree it's those cut abs, but to some degree it's how they imagine they would feel if they look like that. What they're really looking for is a certain kind of a feeling, but it's that body image that represents what that feeling is. But I suspect what they're really aiming at is the feeling.
That's such a good point, Michael. And isn't that ultimately like what human beings are after, is to be happy and
content?
Yeah, and content. And I think we've maybe been tricked into thinking that looking a certain way or having certain things or getting to a certain place in life is going to make us happy and content. So perhaps maybe a big part of this would also be finding contentment is perhaps a big part of making peace with food.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHEOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Contentment. Well, this comes, we've just walked this dog around the block with this patient of mine, talking about the food that makes her ill, but it gives her such comfort. What she's really looking for is that contentment. I think that's what she's saying. She's saying, I want to feel content. This thing, for whatever reason, gives me a moment of contentness. I don't know why it gives her a moment of contentness. That might be worth investigating. How does it make you content? Maybe she's being a bad girl and she kind of likes being a bad girl. Or maybe as a kid it was a treat and, it had a moment of delight because it was a treat. I don't know what that means for her, but you've set me off on the path of inquiring, how is it that it makes you feel that way? And when as a kid did you get to enjoy this food and feel that way?
A lot of these issues actually begin in our younger years. Sometimes it's from watching a parent of ours go on lots of diets and feeling like that's just the way that life is. And sometimes food is used as a reward of some kind, or even a bribe of some kind to get you to do certain things. And that can really influence our relationship with food.
Wow, you'd really end up with kind of a love-hate then, because it's like you want it, but it's being used as a reward, so you're being manipulated. So I love it, I hate it. I love you, I hate you. So could we put in our 20%, I'm not suggesting that we become psychotherapists, but more like we become curious about people's origin story around how it is that a food is a certain way for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that would fall under the listen to your body piece. Yeah. So definitely, I think it's very worthwhile for people to explore how food is for them and observe how different foods make them feel and their emotions when they reach for certain foods.
Yeah. I'm thinking too, my role as the practitioner, as we've uncovered this in the conversation, there's probably going to be some shame that shows up somewhere along the path here. And to be attentive to that. I mean, much in the same way that a lot of practitioners are very tuned into trauma, like just being aware of different traumas that people have had. I'm not saying people have had trauma with food, maybe they have, but just recognizing that shame is probably going to be intertwined there somehow, and to figure out a way of leaving some space for that, working with that. You've had a lot of experience working with people around this. When you are working with someone and you notice that they've got some kind of shame coming up around food, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. I usually see if the patient is already doing some kind of mindfulness practice or something that allows them to be more present, because whether they are, they like to go hiking in nature, or whether they do yoga or they like to meditate, I encourage them to take up some of those activities, because when we are present, then we can tune into ourself better. And that's when we can listen more to our own emotions and see, and just check in with ourselves. And this is something that I experience in my personal life as well. I've noticed that sometimes when I'm feeling really stressed or I have some kind of challenging emotion come up, I'm only human. And definitely in those situations, like I notice that I want to like eat some highly palatable foods because it gives me kind of that dopamine hit that helps to make me feel more comforted. And sometimes it'll be the other way around where, I'll have a couple of days where I feel like, I just feel so ravenous for, certain foods. I want to eat the whole bag of chips or something. And that's an opportunity for me to check in with myself and be like, oh, what's going on these couple of days, Brenda Lee? And sometimes, yeah, that can be really helpful.
Yeah. It sounds to me that maybe part of the 20% is some kind of capacity for compassion for oneself. We didn't say that the 20% was going to be easy. We just said the most important and effective.
Are we pushing 30% now?
No, I don't think so. No, I think that compassion piece pays dividends in lots of other places.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so we've got the principles of, focusing on principles. We got that one pillar. I should say pillars. We have the pillar of focusing on principles, the pillar of listening to your body. What else goes into this intertwined mix besides a nice big fat ribeye steak?
Yeah, what else goes into the 20%? I do Chinese medicine, so I look at people's body constitutions. So to me, that's something that I think is really important for people's health, but I don't know if it fits into this. I think this is more general, that the 20% that we're talking about, kind of more general stuff.
Well, constitution is pretty important. I mean, we walk around in it.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So I would say that is pretty important because we can get really sick if we eat foods that are not right for our constitution. So I think it is really valuable to know our constitution and to feel empowered to know, okay, these foods are going to support my constitution and these foods are not.
Mm-hmm. I mean, my suspicion is if a food doesn't support your constitution, it doesn't mean you never get to eat it. It might mean eat it sometimes.
It depends who you ask. If you ask my teacher, Tracy Stewart, she'd be like, you would have to strictly avoid certain foods. And so, yeah, for some people, especially, so I do the Sasang Constitution. I studied with Tracy, and a lot of so young, they have to be really strict. They can become very sensitive to warming foods like garlic and onions. I'm so young, though, so I'm someone who does cheat sometimes. And, I eat foods sometimes that are not right for my constitution, and I don't really notice it quite as much.
What is it? So young is like Xiaoyang in Chinese?
Yes, it is Shaoyang, but it's not like the 6 conformations. So this is more like greater yin, greater yang, lesser yin, lesser yang. It's like the bigrams when the yin and yang split into the 4 bigrams.
So what is a so young constitute? Well, okay, so first of all, yeah, I'm really curious because like you're saying, some people are more sensitive. Some people may be a little, when I say sensitive, I mean reactive to food. Some people may be a little less reactive. So the so young sounds like a bit more reactive. You're going to notice something sooner if you're eating off the menu.
Absolutely.
So what does a so young constitution look like? Oh my God, I'm afraid it's me.
So our constitution is basically like our internal climate or our internal landscape. And so we look to nature and see our body as a reflection of that. And so yang is basically a very hot and dry environment. So yang is lesser yang because when yang gets to its greatest point, that's when it starts to transform into yin. But we're still at the lesser yang phase. It's not about to transform into yin anytime soon. This is pure yang. It's hot and it's dry. So these people need cooling foods to kind of cool down and moisten that desert-like environment in their body and bring it to more of a balance.
So no garlic,
No garlic.
probably no cinnamon, probably no onions, hot spicy gongbao chicken.
No, chicken's warming too. So it can be a challenging diet to follow. But the nice thing is that So Young respond really quickly to the diet. They often feel significantly better within 2 weeks of doing the diet. And that's because when you have a fire going on inside your body, all you have to do is just spray it with a fire extinguisher and it'll go out right away.
Or choke off its oxygen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Coffee's probably in that category too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whiskey? Yeah, probably in that category. Oh boy. Okay. So this brings me to another thought with our 80-20. We've just been talking about the 20% that's helpful. You bring up the satsang constitutions and how, if you eat the right stuff, it's really, really helpful. And that makes sense to me. That totally makes sense given what I think I know about Chinese medicine. So because of yin and yang, there's the stuff that we can do that's helpful. There's the 20% of what we can do that's helpful. We've had a little discussion about that, and it's been really fun. So thank you for this. What's the 20% that should be avoided? Again, with the idea that that's going to get us 80% toward where we want to go.
Okay. I'm so excited to talk about this because I've been doing the what not to do for a very long time.
You have a don't do list.
So I've been investigating nutrition for the past 15 years. And I've spent most of those years feeling very confused because I've studied this subject in university, but I've also read a lot of different things online and read a lot of different books. And there are just so many different opinions. So one of the key things to avoid is to go on different diet groups and look at people's experiences on those groups and kind of join dietary communities. I strongly advise against that because people can sometimes develop like a little bit of an almost religious allegiance to a certain diet. It's almost like a cult sometimes. Like I'm vegan or I'm carnivore or whatever, and I still lurk on these diet groups so that I can understand people's experiences on these groups. And what I often see is that I've been on this carnivore diet for 6 weeks and I feel awful. And all I'm having is beef, coffee, and water. And then people will swarm in and say, you got to get rid of that coffee. It's the coffee that's responsible for all your symptoms. So you just got to go down to eating beef and water. And so it can be really problematic to be a part of these groups. Yeah, so definitely avoid that because it can keep fueling you going into the wrong direction.
I've got some patients. They're in different kinds of groups. This is just kind of a sidebar, like maybe asthma. People have asthma, they go in the asthma group. And everyone in the asthma group, everyone's got their idea and here's what you should do. And some people are very medically inclined and some are very alternative inclined or whatever. Usually the groups will sort themselves in a certain way. But that group think can be so strong that when they have an experience that's different than the group, maybe they're getting better and they don't need their inhaler as much. And people are like, no, you got to be on that inhaler all the time. All right. Or like, oh, no, that's not possible. All right. It's been medically proven by science. This thing cannot change, blah, blah, blah. You must take your medication. And I've seen folks that go on these illness support groups, very similar thing. There's kind of a mindset. It's a bit culty, and their own actual experience that may be different, it basically has no room there.
Yes, it's very problematic. And actually, this ties into the principle of listening to your body, because what happens is when we go into these groups and we read all these posts by other people, then our mind takes over. And then that's when it's all intellectual. It's all about theories that according to the theory, this, and this, and who, like, never mind how my body feels. It's all about what other people are saying. And that's something to avoid for sure.
Yeah. So avoid the groupthink. Okay. All right. That sounds important. I get it. What else?
I would say also, I actually don't think there's much of a point in reading articles about nutrition.
You are so radical, Brenda Lee.
I know. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for this.
You're in trouble. You're in trouble already. Welcome to the club.
Thank you. Yeah. Unless you have a PhD in nutrition, there's no point reading articles. And here's why. Because I think the vast majority of anything you read online is going to be majorly cherry-picked. Because I'm pretty sure I can find 10 articles telling you that the keto diet is amazing. And I can also find you 10 articles saying that the keto diet is horrible. So basically, what I'm seeing is that people are just reading and listening to what caters to their narrative. And that doesn't really help in helping people actually figure out what's going to work for their body.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner. Because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital chi, and that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
Right. We have a bias looking for a confirmation.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I think it's far more worthwhile to just focus on the principles and listen to your body and just ignore all the noise out there.
Again, simple, not easy. I mean, we're walking around in our body. We can listen to it all the time. Should we? It's like the Mission Impossible thing. Your mission, should you decide to accept it or not, is to listen to your body. People love science and articles and being proven right. Okay, what else can they do to replace that? You know, it's really hard to let go of something unless you can replace it with something else that feels like it's helpful.
Yes. Okay. I'm glad you asked that. So I think something where we can actually, because people like to have information and knowledge is power. So I'm not saying that we should stop learning, but I think here's where we should focus our energy when it comes to learning is looking at, I like to look at kind of tried and true. So what's tried and true? There are a few things. Okay, so a few things here. The first thing is people is often like, there's this like hierarchy of scientific evidence and like case studies are on the bottom and near the top of the hierarchy are randomized control trials. But I think screw the whole pyramid. Like the most robust form of evidence that we have right now, I think, are communities of people who have made it past 100 years of age and they're still living long, healthy, productive lives.
Oh, wait a minute. Didn't you just tell us not to go online to communities?
Yeah, I'm encouraging you to go to in-person communities.
Okay.
Yes.
Of people that are old and vital.
Because those are living case studies of people who have made it this far. And I think that is the most reliable form of evidence. Because that is evidence that is There's no confirmation bias. There's no industry sponsorship, whatever to it. These people have actually lived this long. And if you want to live this long, let's go and see what those people are doing.
I love the piece that you mentioned about in person.
That's something that I think is really important for health too, is having in-person connections, which are harder and harder these days, because isolation is one of the biggest killers, actually. I think there's scientists that have found that it's more deadly than cigarettes and alcohol is actually isolation.
And isn't it especially interesting as we come out of the plague years and as there's this air quotes social media that gives the appearance of connection that people connect to, that we are increasingly more isolated, and that's seen as a virtue in some way. It's like, well, I'm safer, right? During COVID, it was about, well, isolate to be safe. And a lot of folks, especially younger people, it's very difficult for them to be face-to-face in the same room with someone, eyeball to eyeball. And so there's that appearance of safety by having the mediation of the phone. But that eyeball to eyeball, especially over a dinner table.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sounding kind of old-fashioned here, partly because I'm old. But man, you don't get away with nothing at the dinner table.
Thanks for mentioning the dinner table, actually. I think that might be another one of the mini principles, is to share your meals with other people over, is to eat your meals with other people that kind of lift you up. And I think there's actually, in the Brazil food guide, I think, in their national food guidelines, one of their guidelines is actually to eat with other people. And that's a health guideline.
Yeah, I'm putting that in the 20%. That makes sense. That intuitively feels right. And no phones.
Oh, 100%. I'm with you on that one.
I'm constantly having to tell my wife, put the damn phone down. No, give me the phone. She's like a teenager. Okay, Brenda Lee, you're talking some old-fashioned principles here.
Can I add one more old-fashioned principle?
You can add as many as you want.
Okay. Well, I just had one more thing to add, because we were talking about, learning and still finding ways to accumulate more knowledge in a way that's useful. And there's one more area where I think people can focus their energy on learning about nutrition. And that's in the area of traditional foods and traditional cultures. So that's another one of my tried and true things, because traditional cultures have been around for thousands of years. So their diet.
Mm-hmm. They're like old people.
Yes. So these diets and these foods and these ways of eating from different traditional cultures are something that are really worthwhile to study, because they've been tested over time. So one of the things that we can do is look at where we live, our environment and our climate, and examine, okay, who are the traditional people who lived on this land, and how can we learn from them about how they have foraged and harvested and grown food in this climate for thousands of years, because that gives us a clue about maybe that's how we could be eating to be staying healthy.
Leaning on what has worked.
Yes.
Leaning on what nature says, this is appropriate here, in this climate, in this space, in these seasons. Much trickier in our modern day, especially if you live in a place where migratory people used to live. So there's that as well.
Yeah. So for them, they might not have been able to grow as much food because they didn't have an established kind of area. So I suspect those cultures might have relied more on animal products. And that's something else we can learn from is, how did traditional people honor the whole animal from head to tail and using all the organs? Because that is actually a really important way to nourish our bodies. In Chinese medicine, we know that some of the most potent herbs are animal-based. And whatever organ of the animal is going to nourish our organs. So really normalizing eating all the odd bits of the animal, I think, are really important too.
Yeah, I believe that's an acquired taste. But maybe all of our tastes are acquired tastes when I think about it. I remember living in Taiwan, and my friends there loved chou tofu. And like, you're at chou, you're at hao, right? Like chou tofu you could smell from 3 blocks away. It's like, that's the stuff. And, I mean, I tried it, but man, I just could not wrap my taste buds around it. And yet, when I think about the environment of Taiwan, which is really humid, I mean, people here in St. Louis, Missouri complain about it being hot and humid, but it's like, yeah, try Taipei. So it's really hot and humid down there, and the chou tofu is so, I mean, it's like almost pathologically fragrant, you know? So it's really good at dispersing dampness,
That's so cool.
right? And they love it there. But again, it's an acquired taste. And from a Chinese medicine perspective, I can see how that would be helpful. Super, super fragrant. It's going to cut and break up that stagnating dampness.
That's so fascinating because I only think about like kind of acrid herbs and spices cutting through dampness. And it's so interesting that the fragrance generated from fermentation could also have the same effect.
Sure. Yeah. Isn't Chinese medicine fun?
So much fun.
Okay. So this seems like a pretty good place to start. 20% of things to attend to, 20% of things to sidestep. It's a good start. And I would invite all y'all's out there listening, as you think about this, you'll probably find some stuff of your own. And if you do, like, send it in on the back of a $20 bill or just email it. And, I could share it on the podcast, like in a little beginning segment or something, so that we can benefit from the wisdom of our community around this idea of the 20% around food that's helpful and the 20% avoid.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Anything else to add?
No, I don't think so, Michael. I think we've covered it. We've had a very hearty discussion, I think.
Yes, we have. Okay. Brenda Lee, it is always a delight to hang out with you. Thank you so much for this investigation today.
Likewise, Michael, I had a blast today.
Food is such an emotionally loaded topic, whether it's an overfocus on macronutrients or emotional fatigue from feeling like you need to be perfect in a world that's anything but. I'm not trying to help my patients with excuses when they feel like a failure for not measuring up to someone else's standard of willpower. And when obsession about food diminishes the joy that comes from food, that's also a problem. So I like the idea of encouraging people to shoot for the most important 20% that will give them the 80% of what they're looking for in their nutrition. And likewise, knowing the 20% of what they should avoid. This seems more than doable, and it leans more on process and trajectory than perfection and obsession. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.